What was the most unexpected firing from a job you've ever seen or heard about from anyone you know? Before we get started, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and turn on the bell so you don't miss future videos. Thanks for the support. Oh me, I was hired by a roofing company to increase their B2B sales and get them set up to bid on government jobs. Spent a couple months getting everything set for bidding, which required certification, registering with several different government entities, setting up computer programs, and making contacts with people involved in the bidding process. The day we're going to go live and start placing bids, my boss calls me that morning and tells me I'm fired. I'm guessing he figured, he's got everything set up, I'll save some money and run the process myself. Unfortunately for him, I hadn't saved any of the information to our shared drive. No logins or passwords for any of the necessary websites. No contact information for any of the helpful people I'd spent weeks cultivating, etc. Long story short, his cunning plan didn't work, and the company folded in under a year. Not just due to his inability to pursue big jobs, he'd also burnt pretty much every bridge with contractors in the area as well. Next story. I used to work at a major distribution center in Virginia, managing temp agency employees. That job had interesting challenges, because in Virginia, temps can be fired at any time for any reason. So one day, one of the plant managers comes up to me and says, "Does John Doe," not his real name, "work for your company?" I responded that he did, and she immediately says, "I just saw him commit a safety violation. I want him gone before the end of the day." Now, unfortunately, that was that. John was a temp. He could be fired at any time for any reason, which was a shame in this case because he was a great associate, but there was nothing we could do. So, I went and escorted him off the premise. Fast forward 2 weeks, and I'm sitting in my office talking to John Doe on the phone, trying to solve an issue with his last check. At that exact moment, the same manager comes in and says, "I thought I told you to fire John Doe." The timing was frankly surreal, given that I just so happened to be on the phone with him at the time, but I answer that yes, we had fired him 2 weeks ago, like you told us to. Then she says, "Well then why did I just see him walking around the plant?" Long story short, it turns out the person who had actually committed the safety violation had been some other guy, who we'll call Paul. She saw Paul do this dangerous thing and had simply turned to the nearest person and asked, "What's that guy's name?" That random person had said, "Oh, that's John Doe." And without verifying anything, she had come over to my office and demanded we fire John Doe. Next story. I was working at this studio years ago. This other designer/animator came out of the kitchen eating an ice cream cone. Boss came out of nowhere and angrily fired him. Got up in his face and yelled, "I want you out of here now." Nobody had any idea why, but the best part was that the dude just kept eating his ice cream with zero reaction to being fired, then said, "Can I finish my ice cream cone first?" Boss just stormed out of there all annoyed off. When he was halfway down the hall, the dude was like, "Is that a yes or a no?" and kept eating his ice cream. It was absolutely hilarious. Next story. I was made redundant because the general manager decided to get into a power struggle with our biggest client, my client. When they called his bluff, he dumped them and me as they could no longer afford my salary. I was then fired from my next job because I took too many days off to care for my wife and newborn, who had a very high risk and troubled birth. I took 14 days off. This is in Australia. Next story. I took a couple of days off because I got a phone call from the police that my father had a serious personal emergency. I was at his place dealing with the aftermath at his home on day 2, when I got a call asking if I could come in for a disciplinary hearing for calling in sick on the day of work. Sorry, my dad didn't let me know the day before that he was going to do it, you know. Anyway, it gets to the hearing, and I am let go because my absence had a negative impact on the company's performance, and the reasoning for my absence wasn't valid apparently. Even with photos of the blood-covered floor and the messages between my brothers trying to figure out what we are going to do with the dogs while he is in hospital, took the case to Citizens Advice, who then got me a solicitor free of charge. I now know why, since I got a 7.5K payout, and the AM who made the decision was dismissed. I got an apology letter from someone higher than them stating that it was completely out of order and offered my position back to me, but I already accepted a job elsewhere, which, after working my behind off in, has definitely led me down a better path anyway. Forget Betfred is all I am saying. They made what was already a couple of the worst days of my life even worse. I really did not need that extra stress adding to what I was going through. Next story. I used to be a supervisor at a major distribution center for a well-known clothing brand. One of my coworkers, a really cool guy named Danny, always wore a collared shirt and tie to work, even though we didn't have to, because he was that kind of guy. He did this every single shift, and everyone knew it. He was the only guy in the plant, including the VP of production, who wore a collared shirt and tie. Unfortunately for him, that was technically a safety violation, because the tie could theoretically get caught in a conveyor belt. Now, in reality, that wasn't going to happen because the belts were mounted to the ceiling. There was zero chance of any real incident happening. One day, he's just doing his rounds, walking the floor like he always does, and he passes by one of the plant managers, a guy he had seen and worked with every single day for 7 months now. The dude points at him, says, "That tie is a security violation, you're fired." And that was it. Game over. Zero recourse. But that was just how that company worked. They cut excellent employees for stupid reasons, then complained about shortages and lack of competence. Next story. On a dare, a new employee got caught using the executive lavatory, a bathroom off limits to regular employees. He knew it was risky, but did it anyway because he mistakenly believed the CEO was away. Instead, he got caught red-handed and was summarily fired. I joined other regular employees in protesting his firing, stating that all lavatories should be available, unless they're inside an executive's private office, but we were simply told, rules are rules, period. Next story, my own. I worked at the same company for 6 years. I received multiple promotions, and as well as an award during my time there. I had never been written up or even verbally scolded for any wrongdoings or shortcomings. We had a corporate restructure, and a lot of employees' job duties changed, mine included. My job went from being a customer service representative to more of a salesy type role, which I was neither comfortable or happy with. This change in responsibility was not discussed with employees prior to the change. We were just pulled into a meeting and told basically, "This is your job now." Not only that, but because of the restructure, various employees were either moved around into different departments or even let go from the company completely. This left my department horribly understaffed. Fast forward through a miserable 2 months doing the work of 3 full-time employees. Work I was not qualified or adequately trained to do. I had put in my 2 weeks' notice and accepted a position within the same company, but in a different department. I was 1 week away from leaving that awful job when I was called into my director's office and fired for failing to keep up with my job duties. The icing on top of the cake was, since the new job I accepted was within the same company, I lost it too. It hurts me to this day that I didn't stand up for myself more. I was in such shock. Silver lining, because of this whole debacle, I was able to change industries, and I am much happier now. Next story. My sister's fiancé, who was her girlfriend at the time, was fired after 2 days because the job realized they actually had to accommodate their disabilities. Next story. A friend of mine worked at a factory, noticed his paycheck was short 1 week, went in on his day off to talk it over with payroll. Payroll told him to talk to his boss. He approached his boss. His boss said something like, "You think you can come on the floor and not work?" My friend said, "You think you can not pay me?" My friend got written up for insubordination, then got a call on MLK Day saying he's fired. My friend was able to get unemployment because he'd never had another write-up, then got a much better job. Next story. I had one of the highest ratings in my company. I was booked a month in advance with an agenda full of regulars. My one drawback? I was not putting enough effort in selling their products, but more into establishing long-term customers. Every single customer had already at least one product from their strongest sellers. The year I got fired, I also got the news that my father was diagnosed with terminal cancer and I was pregnant. Their excuse? I called in sick too much. I even came to work with a broken ankle, in a knee-high cast, and for a 100% standing job. Today, 5 years later, my salon is thriving with an average of a 93% full agenda, except recent lockdowns, which I survived thanks to prepaid appointments from the 80% loyal customers of total customers. While they are closing salons left and right, including their biggest one. It seems my work ethic and strategy works better long run. Who would have thought? Next story. I worked in a bizarrely woke tech startup. They asked the employees to help clean up a public park on the weekend, probably as a marketing thing, and I simply said, no, that's not what I was hired for. As I was already overworked, and though the idea is useless, the parks get cleaned by the government every month either. got fired the next day, without any explanation. The company later won an award for their environmental awareness. Next story. I got my pay cut 10% because COVID. Okay. Then a year later, when I was working from home, they said I had to do my old job and come into work, prior to me being vaccinated, and do my old job too. Never mentioned any increase in pay, just absolutely deal with it, was my old boss's attitude. I said, I'm not comfortable with that, and mentioned money. 2 weeks later, I got fired. Next story. I worked for a company that didn't ever fire anybody. Laid people off a lot, but never fired them. I had people late 3 times a day. Had a guy no call, no show for over a month. Had people whose 90th day was like the first. Even had a guy who was not only unproductive himself, but also dragged down productivity of those around him. Still, nobody ever got fired, except one guy. He accidentally leaked some information on a public forum with coworkers and was fired within an hour of posting it. Next story. Conference call with sales team. Very friendly and mild-mannered rockstar sales guy, RSG, had a bad quarter and was getting an earful from supervisor. She wasn't inappropriate, but she was forceful with her strategies for improvement. RSG stands up, says to his boss, "F you, jerk," and "suck this," and much more. Team is shook and horrified. Turns out we hear he was having problems at home and had started adding alcohol to his coffee on the regular. The firing was a wee bit of a surprise because it was a small family company and someone literally intoxicated stripped at a holiday party once. Oh boy, the drunken holiday parties. But his behavior was so out of character too. Next story. It was me. Hired as an operations manager to fix a company's day-to-day ops and implement a new system. Worked tirelessly for 2 years rebuilding the culture of the staff and bridging departments because the owners were terrible. I hired 2 exceptionally intelligent people who helped me build a database that tracked data that could be used for procurement/forecasting and also sales trends. This database was crucial to the implementation of the new ERP system. During implementation, the ERP consultant said that the database probably put us a few years ahead since the ERP system had all this advanced clean data. Just before implementation was completed, they hired a new GM. I knew this was the end for me, but I kept plugging away hoping for the best. Not a week after the system went live, they fired me. I was close to the HR director, and she called me a week later and told me that the entire supply chain team, warehouse, purchasing, and production, walked off in protest. A few days later, 10 people quit, and 2 of them were the ones responsible for the database and setup. The ERP system crashed a few weeks later, and both owners begged me to come back. Next story. My coworker got fired for sitting around talking on his cell phone for hours at a time while billing himself on projects for that time. It's a tiny 3-person company, and the owner who hired us showed on the first day that she had a pet camera in the office that monitored it. This was due to a defense attorney downstairs consistently having his clients of questionable character accidentally show up to her door. Turns out he also would turn around and look in the mirror to check out his own butt from time to time. Next story. I was a mobile tech for Lexus. Pretty much just programmed garage door openers and changed batteries. Well, one day after having a great day on the road, service manager comes over and tells me we need to go upstairs. Well, the only 2 things upstairs are HR and accounting, so I already knew it wasn't good. They told me they would no longer have the mobile program anymore. I thought, okay, cool, now I can go back in the shop. Nope, they said they don't do lateral moves. I had more seniority than half the guys there. Oh well, I'm in a much better place now, and have the union to ensure no stupid mistakes like that happen again. It's the only job I've ever been let go from. Next story. That happened maybe 6 years ago. My very close friend worked in a circus. He was just sales manager, didn't attend in performance. So, day by day he noticed that circus bosses did not treat animals good. Some of the animals looked very bad, so he decided to call police. Unfortunately, because of corruption, bosses solved this problem and fired him. Next story. I had a technician that had to go to a hangar at the airport for the first half of the day and then report back to the terminal after lunch. He was hourly, so he had to clock in/out. I always had a hard time reaching because he was either really busy fixing computers or in the server room. I couldn't figure out what he was up to since he clocked in at exactly 8 a.m. every morning, so I knew he was at work. I asked another tech to follow him after he clocked in to see what he was up to. For 5 days straight, he never saw him clock in, yet I saw it on his time card. Yep, You guessed it. He bought the same time card machine and clocked in from home every morning and went back to bed. I promptly fired the weasel. Next story. The firing wasn't expected, but the circumstances were. One day at work, like 5 guys in black suits walked in. They were FBI, looking for a certain employee. Turned out, this guy was part of a drug trafficking ring, and a local cop was involved as well. I didn't know him at all, but he seemed nice and helpful in the workplace. We were all pretty shocked. Next story. I opened a can of worms. I fired one employee because she was not doing her job. When I had asked her to do her job, she said she didn't have to do any work. The branch manager got in my face for firing this employee, and when I asked why he was defending an employee who refused to do any work, he told me to back off, or else. So, I had security escort the branch manager from the building for making a threat. A very unoriginal threat, but still, it was a threat. This was all on my first day at this branch office. On the second day, I authorized a 45-minute meeting with the rest of the staff to properly introduce myself and find out what the heck was going on with their former manager and that lazy employee. First, the lazy employee was having an affair with the HR rep I replaced. Then, the lazy employee cheated on the HR rep with the branch manager. The HR rep quit because he couldn't report them without exposing his previous affair. The lazy employee assumed she was untouchable because she threatened to tell the branch manager's wife they were having an affair unless she kept her job. I fired the lazy employee, and the branch manager assumed his wife was going to find out about his affair, which is why he got in my face. I ended the meeting by asking the staff to end any illicit affairs I did not yet know about. Next story. My brother got fired from Barnes & Noble for enforcing the mask mandate. He was a manager, and apparently too many people called and complained about having to wear a mask. Next story. This should be a good one. I had just returned from a 6-month trip in New Zealand. Loved it. Loved the scenery and loved the people, especially the people I was staying with. Still keep in touch with one of them to this day. Really great friend, and he's like an older brother to me. I returned to the UK, and as usual, got some nonsense from my parents about working. I'm Asian. I'm aware I need to work. So, I applied for several jobs, been successful with some and unsuccessful with some. It happens. Got a job at a retail store named Next in central London, and it was good for the first 2 weeks. Got along with 2 of the department managers, especially the store manager, and some of the colleagues there. The next 2 weeks were heck for me. My depression returned. I made it aware to the management as you're supposed to, so they can support you in every way they can, or so I thought. Someone at work thought it would be okay to report to my manager that I was bipolar when I showed absolutely no symptoms at all of that, and because the management had gone with that and even reported it to HR, I got sacked. Not knowing what had happened, it hit me a few seconds later, and I had broken down on the spot. Couldn't hold in my tears to the point where I looked like a mess. Sought therapy, and my appointment for a tribunal had taken so long that I gave up on it. Truth be told, and everyone probably knows this by now, retail staff in general can be absolutely toxic and vile. I don't miss working there, though I did get along with the security there. They were great. Next story. I started working with a company in early 2017. Early 2020, our parent company purchased another company in our region and merged them into us. A few months later, I got called in on a day off to meet with HR. When I got there, one of my coworkers said that they were just giving everyone new role clarification sheets post-merger. That was wrong. Both the manager and myself were being let go due to the restructuring. The company was good about it, though. They kept us through the start of the next month, so we could stay on the insurance for that month. There was a severance payment, and they paid a company to help us rework our resume. I spent a good bit of 2020 looking for work. Started somewhere that I left after 6 months, and now I'm back at that same company, but at a higher pay. Next story, I'll flip it and spin it. The most unexpected non-firing from a job I've ever heard of was a guy who went out of town with some friends, one of said friends was the boss, to see a concert, and they all stayed in the same hotel room. After the concert, the friends happened to meet up with the band at a bar, and everyone got epically intoxicated. Later, this dude wakes up still intoxicated and has to take a piss. Instead of going to the bathroom, his intoxicated self stumbles to the corner of the room and relieves himself, where the boss was sleeping on the floor. He sobers up fast, but not actual sobriety. That panicked hyper energy that you think serves for sobriety When you drunkenly realize you're doing something really, really bad. He runs out of the hotel in his skivvies just thinking he had to get home fast. Strange town, no car. I guess I can take a train, must have passed through his mind. So he tries to get into what he thought was a train station. Problem was it was locked. So he started banging on the door and screaming at the top of his lungs. Other problem, it wasn't a train station. It was a kindergarten that would be opening up soon. That's when the cops got called. Still, after all that, drunken boss pisser owner, underwear-clad kindergarten besieger kept his job. Next story. Whether rightly or wrongly, my father hired my brother's godmother into his business to manage HR. He had an underperforming sales rep and pulled in his new head of HR to ask what to do. She told him to fire her, which to his regret, he did. He later realized he didn't follow due process and United Kingdom law. So the next day, he fired his HR manager on the spot. This was 10 years ago, and they still don't speak. Next story. Got laid off from my last job on June 1st of this year, just a few weeks after my best performance review to date and being told I'd be getting a raise. That sudden turnaround took me by surprise for sure. Next story. Bank teller in my small hometown at a small bank many years ago. I actually dated her daughter when I was in high school. She was generally well-liked in the community. Everyone that used that bank knew her. She had been there for several years and was pleasant to deal with. People started noticing that she was taking a lot of weekend vacations to Vegas with her friend, had a brand new car, and was flaunting some pretty nice jewelry. Turns out she was embezzling from business accounts that she noticed were not monitoring their account closely or had a lot of cash transactions, to the tune of $1.2 million. Her colleague that helped her cooperated with the feds and got off pretty light. She pleaded not guilty and fought it. Judge threw the book at her. Needless to say, she was fired. Next story. I had a job where every department had one meeting a week and one meeting a month for the entire company. My department had an unexpected meeting, but it was announced by management from elsewhere in the company. When we got to the meeting room, we noticed our manager wasn't there. Turns out they snuck us all off to a meeting while they broke the news to our manager that he was being let go. They wanted him to clear his desk and leave before we got back, while they explained to us the big changes coming up for the company. He was a very good manager, and the other managers did not understand our department. It was not a fun time. Next story. Ex-colleague who had been in the job about 20 years was fired for accepting approximately $10,000 in bribes and incorrectly giving out over $175,000 in government funds. Next story. I used to work an evening/weekend support role for a mostly 9-to-5 office team. I worked Thursday through Monday, with Tuesday and Wednesday as my weekend. So I come in Monday afternoon and meet the guy that we've just hired. Hear from several people that he absolutely rocked the interviews. He's great, look forward to working with him, etc. I have my weekend, come back in on Thursday, and find out that he's been fired. Apparently this guy spent Tuesday and half of Wednesday loudly telling pretty much everybody in the office that he doesn't feel comfortable working under a woman. His direct supervisor, who interviewed him more than once, is a woman. Her direct manager, who also interviewed him, is also a woman. He knew what both of their roles were, continued with the interview process, accepted the job, showed up to work, and then spent 2 days aggressively trying to get fired. It was the weirdest mess, and I missed all of it but the aftermath. Next story. After working 2 years at Walmart, I tried my hardest to get full-time. When I asked my boss, just said, "Make your attendance better and we will talk." I called off a lot when I was a teen, had 5 family members pass a few weeks from each other. Well, after almost a year of not calling off and being in on time, I got fired out of nowhere. They claimed a coworker saw me using the cart pushing machine, like a go-kart, and they had it on tape. They just insisted it was me and refused to show me the tape, and I was fired. Happens a week after I asked about it again, and we got a new store manager. Next story. Where I work, people don't really get fired. They're given the ultimatum to quit or go through the process of termination. A number of years back, our facility director announced her retirement from over 30 years of service, effective immediately. Her office was cleared that day, and an interim replacement was already chosen. Within days, our chief of staff and nurse exec all either quit or were reassigned. Next story. Worked at a sports complex, and in a meeting, we were talking about marketing, and my manager had a different opinion about some marketing strategies with the owner and suggested something else. She was gone the next day. In no way was it disrespectful, just another perspective, and she was fired. Next story. I could write a real long version of this, but I used to manage a mid-sized cannabis farm back before things were legal. I was paid a salary and made sure it was high enough I felt properly compensated, which made me pretty expensive. A couple years into working, he sent me to set up a new property. That meant lots of building greenhouses, electrical, all generators and batteries off-grid, road maintenance, as well as all the logistics of managing workers, drying, etc. We improved production every cycle, year over year. After about 4 years, we got by far our biggest crop, 3 greenhouse cycles plus a big outdoor harvest. He brought my assistant in, asked him if he could do my job, then fired me. This was unexpected because not only was our performance way beyond where it had been, but legalization had arrived. We expected to be shut down in the next year or so. I couldn't imagine he would want to try to train new management for the single year left. Long story short, they failed. Badly. The difference in production that next cycle would have paid me for an entire year alone, and now he was paying 3 guys to do my job, one of whom drunkenly destroyed a bunch of important equipment intoxicated. In the meantime, he owed me upward of $70,000, and I told him I would keep living on his property rent-free while he worked out how to pay me. He ended up giving me several important things for well under market value: yurt, furnishings, wood stove, generator, to pay said debt while his grow fell apart. And yes, I did get paid, and he never grew cannabis again after that year. Next story. I got grief from a supervisor for years and reported it to HR and got nowhere, so left the 2 weeks later they sack her. I could have stayed on, man. Next story. A guy in the education program at my university kinda got fired. He was student teaching. He couldn't get his students to do anything and eventually started bribing them to participate. He would bring in candy, offer bonus points, etc. to anyone who raised their hand. The students reported this to the school's office, and he was booted from the school and had to student teach elsewhere. I still don't know why the students refused to participate in his class, but he may have left that part out to avoid looking bad in front of other student teachers. Next story. I was working at Walmart at the time. My friend from high school ended up working there also. 3 months into his probation, his last day they called him into the office. He believed he was getting hired, but instead they said his attendance has been an issue. His response was they put him in a job he didn't feel comfortable with, which ended up getting injured. Walmart sent them into their own doctor, which the doctor replied he was good to work the next day. My friend instead went to his own doctor, and they said he had a major concussion. After he got fired, he sued Walmart in court and won $10,000. Next story. There was this teacher in a languages school I worked for a long time ago. He was elegant and polite. One day my supervisor told me that some girls, adult, complained because the guy was taking pics of their legs under the desk. My supervisor went right to his classroom and simply said, "Hey you, go home and don't ever come back." Gotta hand it to my supervisor. He was swift, quick, and efficient in handling the situation. Next story. Actually quite recent. A model employee with 5+ years with the company was unexpectedly fired due to cheating the clocking in policy. It's the 3rd person I've known fired that way in my time here. Next story. Mine. I was helping another store, pizza, an hour's drive away because it was just the GM and an assistant manager that was due to go into labor any day now. I got $10 per day cash for gas and travel time each way. Within 2 months, I increased our CSC, customer service compliance, aka late versus on-time deliveries, cut back on food overusage by being absolutely militant on portion cup usage and talking people into and out of position, like playing an accordion in one hand and guitar in the other. The most capable people went on cheese/oven tending so they could double-check orders before they went in. It helped when the fat-ass pregnant chick went on maternity leave because she wasn't there anymore, not being unkind. I never saw worse shift numbers before or since. The GM begged me to transfer and drive 2 hours round trip daily for $8 per hour, and I kept saying no. One Saturday night, we had 5 bad orders over the course of the shift where no one picked them up. It happens. It was a military-based town, and if you're caught intoxicated driving by the MPs, it's an Article 15 whether you leave base or not. Area manager calls, and the GM accused me of theft by popping the till and pocketing the cash, then batting out the order. GM claimed she'd called everyone, and they claimed they'd all picked them up and paid cash. But My area manager was going to call them to confirm and was just giving me a heads up. A few minutes later, the GM calls me and says she'll drop it if I agree to a transfer with no gas recompense or travel time. I call my AM back and tell him what she just said and sent him a screenshot of my call log showing she'd just called. Meanwhile, he'd called all the customers and there were a few set up voicemails, a couple that went to VM with the customer name, and one that hung up when he identified himself and the company. It was me versus a GM, and he felt constrained to fire me because of the dollar amount of the accusation, but knew something was off. Instead, he let me put in my 2-week notice retroactively so I could be rehired, and encouraged it, and said to give him some time to look into things before reapplying. Got a job 5 minutes from home as a welder a couple days later, and the GM's numbers tanked so hard and fast, she was fired after 2 months of dropping like a bowling ball from space. I eventually went back PT as a driver and a fill-in emergency manager, and the area manager and I are still Facebook friends. Dude was just in a bind with a terrible decision to make because of who was accusing who. Next story. One of my first jobs was temping at a local insurance agency. I was a pregnant 19-year-old college student, was upfront about it, even though I didn't have to be, and the guy made a big deal about how generous he was being about helping me out with a job. My aunt owned the temp agency that I went through. I went through the same hiring and dual interview process as the other candidates, and I had high GPA and skill scores. He picked me out of 3 or 4 others who were sent with similar skill sets. Hold that thought, it's important. After he called to tell me I had the job, he made me take another typing test because he didn't believe my scores were accurate. I scored higher on his. Put me on a training program, then chastised me for finishing too quickly, saying there's no way I completed it all, never mind the perfect score on the assessment. He also started asking questions about how I felt on certain issues politically. At this point, I'm weirded out a bit. Then I report back to the temp agency to let them know how my first day went. They were shocked because this guy told them he hired someone else and then hired me behind their backs, which is a contact breach and theft of service resulting in a $400 direct hire fee. And this was not the first time he'd done it, so he should know better. I show up for my second day and am promptly fired for being dishonest and disloyal to the company. Why? Because he didn't know I was related to my aunt. Didn't think it should matter? Besides that we had the same last name, and because he got caught stealing. I was somehow supposed to know that he was going to steal me and had set him up and squealed on him after all the charity he had given me in my condition. You're still a misogynistic sleazeball, Mr. H. Next story. My previous company had problems with HR people for whatever reason. They couldn't keep one around, and the one that we finally got was horrible. Despite that, she was still with the company for 2 years. Then, one day she came in to help some of us start getting retirement funds set up. We sat down with her around 10:30, went through everything, helped us fill out the forms, and explained how she'd chosen a specific one herself. About 2.5 hours later, everyone at the company got an email saying that she was no longer an employee. We all just completely confused. She'd literally just be talking about her retirement fund she'd set up 2.5 hours earlier, and it was the middle of the day. The rumor going around the company after was that she'd sassed the number 3 at the company and had gotten herself fired on the spot. Based on the 2 years I had to work with her, I fully believe that that is what happened. She had a bad habit of undermining, talking down to, and insulting managers, as well as all the employees. And well, the idea of her insulting the number 3 at the company is not far-fetched. We had previously received a weird email from the company, telling us that in lieu of the president or vice president, we should refer to this other woman for decisions. The email came out of the blue. We pieced everything together after. HR lady had had a tangle with her before. They sent out this email as a reminder of who actually ranked at the company. Then HR lady did it again. Next story. 2 that I saw. My lead when I was doing apartment maintenance. He was great at the job and was the type of lead who believed that your job as a lead is to turn those under you into future leads. This guy knew his mess. He was fired one day, came out of nowhere. Turns out, while he was in apartments repairing whatever, he was stealing their meds. Next lead was a lazy, no-good son of a difficult person who called me white boy, I was almost 40 at the time, and said that he only liked working with Mexicans because you white people are too absolutely lazy and overpaid. Second time was a few years ago. Came into work and discovered that 2 coworkers were fired. We clock in via a website on your cell phone. It records your location when you clock in. These two were spoofing their location, clocking in from home at 5 a.m. and dropping their kids off at school, having breakfast somewhere, doing whatever, and then they clocked out from home after getting some overtime every afternoon. There was no write-up, no investigation. Some corporate guy showed up early one morning and saw them clock in while he was alone in the office. As soon as they showed up, they were fired. Next story, my own. I was the supervisor's number one. Been there 3 years, excellent evaluations, perfect record, never got into trouble, popular. They made a really bad hiring decision. This woman must have been bipolar or something, and on top of that was completely unfit for the job, or any job. Our concerns were dismissed. Eventually, my supervisor told me that if she is so bad, then to put it in writing. My letter ended up being 7 pages long. She committed that much misconduct within her first month. Management didn't appreciate it, blamed me for her misconduct, and fired me instead when they asked how she was doing, and I said that she was purposely blocking doorways as a bullying technique. She has since made another employee quit. 3 years, great employee, never in trouble. The last remaining employee, 9 years, great evals, popular, also has a perfect record, is being bullied by both her and management, who has been on the bad employee's side 10,000%. Next story. 18-year-old working at a fast food place. The boss was 36, newly divorced, and was really into this teenage worker. It first started with him only scheduling her on his shifts. He gave obvious favoritism, like allowing her to choose her role on that shift, making herself food, and spent the majority of the time talking to her. Then it got even weirder. He brought her flowers and chocolates, even baked her a cake during their shifts. Other coworkers started noticing. Once she was offered a promotion, it was rumored she was in a relationship with the boss and got shunned by everyone. Obviously, she wasn't. She actually went to both the assistant manager and HR to report how uncomfortable she was. Instead of discussing things with the boss, they told the girl they would transfer her to another store 45 minutes away. She said no. They fired her. Next story. I was being treated different at one company I worked at when I was like 21. I was told to find all emails and proof of such, which I had, and send it to HR. They decided to sweep it under the rug and fire me over the phone. They told me to come up and get my stuff. They gave me my stuff outside and didn't even let me in. Took out all of the pages of my notes from the notebooks I had there. What made it worse is on my first day there, I had gotten a call from my mom, who lived back in my home state as I lived away from home, that my dad died. Fast forward a month or two later, and I got fired. Next story. I was let go because a pandemic hit and no one was going out, so there was a lot less money coming in for staffing. Pretty unexpected. On the plus side, I was rehired when things started opening back up. But since here in the US, not everyone agrees that COVID is real, I can see a variant getting so bad that I'm let go again. Next story. The firing culture and firing just to fire needs to be shut down. People are people, and people make mistakes. Heck, are at the wrong place at the wrong time. But nope, fired. Forget you, corporate America. Next story. So once upon a time, I worked for a national digital agency. There was 2 large state branches, some offshoots, that had recently been acquired by a multinational that did a wide range of cool mess in a specific slice of tech. There had been much trouble across techland, lots of consolidation of agencies, so we had all seen some things. But the particular state branch I worked in was profitable, so we felt good about it. And I worked on some interesting projects with national visibility. One day at around 10 a.m., we all got called into a room, and some dude explained to us that we no longer had jobs. It was the day before our last monthly pay of the year, the week before Christmas, and we weren't getting paid. Company was now in administration. Perhaps somewhere around 100 to 150 people in different locations lost jobs all simultaneously. They watched while we all shuffled back to our desks and gathered all our personal belongings and left within about 5 minutes. Most everyone, and me, went to the nearest pub and got nice and intoxicated before going home. Some just immediately went home despondent. They had holidays, flights, accommodation booked, and didn't know how they were going to pay for it all. Some had mortgages. I imagine it was a rough Christmas for some families. On the bright side, due to local laws and regulations, the administrator did eventually, like a year later, send me a large check, including lots of redundancy. Employees are a special class of unsecured creditors, and Aussie law makes sure we get paid before anyone, including secured creditors. It's a slow bureaucracy, but it works. As for what happened, the multinational got in serious financial regulatory trouble due to fraud that happened like 7 years before we got bought. They cut us loose and shut financing they were providing. We got caught up in some random series of events that don't really mean much. Next story. Well, after all the information came out, I wasn't surprised this guy was fired. I worked for and retired from a large, very large company. Some of us traveled for work to conferences, symposiums, etc., and the company gave many of us corporate credit cards. American Express corporate cards with no spending limit. Dangerous in the wrong hands. One of the men I worked with met a woman of dubious reputation. Hook, line, and sinker. His wife filed for divorce, kicked him out, etc. Now, the man was just a good old boy from the country and moved this lovely lady into the small house he had found to rent. So far, okay, but his wife wanted her car back, so she took it. The coworker decided his new lady love needed a new car, and since he didn't have the down payment at the moment, he used the corporate credit card to put a down payment on a nice new Corvette. Nothing but the best for his new lady. Now, I don't know what he thought he was going to do when the amount hit corporate accounting office, but it didn't matter. After the car was purchased, and before the 30-day temporary tag had expired, it was parked outside the small house, where he lived with the lovely lady of 3 months. One morning, he goes out to go to work, and that lovely new Corvette is gone. Stolen. He has to call the cops to report it stolen. Somehow during the investigation, it comes out about the credit card, which then is reported to the company. Oh boy. The coworker is given the chance to repay the down payment. Can't. Doesn't have the money. And return the car. Can't do that either. It was gone. He was fired, the new girlfriend left him, and the car was never found. Our theory was, the girlfriend took it during the night and was only using him for the money. Next story. I worked in a call center about 6 years ago during college and was one of a handful of supervisors. During my time there, the call center's head manager was replaced by some new guy that was put there to drive business upward since it was a new-ish company. As a supervisor, our goal was to help train employees and give good customer service that actually solved issues in one go, rather than have reoccurring customers calling because they realized they had more questions/problems. Well, the new manager was all about data and numbers, not customer happiness. A part of his job to grow the business was to cut off a few employees who weren't deemed able to meet his standard. While a few understandable employees were let go, there was one guy, we'll call Jay, that was hugely unexpected by my fellow supervisors/managers. As one last chop from the firing round, Jay was let go simply for spending too long on the phone with customers. 2 weeks prior to this new manager walking in, my teammates literally talked about how we valued Jay because even though he was taking less calls, his attitude and knowledge made up for it by far. He was a single dad, made everyone in the office happy, and was such a hard worker. Instead of consulting Jay or the managers and supervisors below him, the head manager chopped Jay based on a single metric. That day, we all went to the manager's office, explained what a huge mistake he made, and fought for Jay to return. Ultimately, Jay did not return, but we made sure that any big decisions surround our teams were ran through the people who actually worked on the floor. Next story. I was working for a small store high school. It was just the owners, husband, wife, and 3 high school kids, A, B, and C. I'm B. We'd work a couple of hours each day after school, and then work 8 hours Saturday, Sunday every 3rd week. We had a whiteboard calendar in the back to keep track of our schedules. I was scheduled for a weekend that I wanted off for a camping trip and switched with A for one of his weekends on the whiteboard, then went on my trip. When I showed up for work on Monday after school, the husband fired me. Said I didn't show up all weekend when I was scheduled, they couldn't get a hold of me, so that was that. Wow, okay. Took them 2 months to figure out that C erased the board so I'd get fired and they'd hire her friend. She pulled the same thing with A, but the owners realized what was happening. They fired both C and her friend who'd taken my job. They called me back to rehire me but wouldn't apologize. I told them to F off. I put a bunch of fish guts into a Ziploc bag, poked some holes in it, then used a master key at school to put that present into C's locker over the long Easter break. Quite the surprise when she opened it afterwards. Next story, not me, but I worked there at the time. This is about 2 of my coworkers at a food service job. Let's call them Lucy and Chad. Chad was a legitimately bad employee, and the bosses were looking for a way to fire him. Lucy, on the other hand, was always reliable and focused at work. One day, Chad comes in to buy food on his day off and redeems a free treat through our store's punch card system. Lucy waits on him, Chad pays for his other stuff and gets his free thing. Now the bosses decide that Lucy and Chad had been conspiring to fill out his punch card during working hours to steal the free treat. Mind you, we were allowed to eat as much as we wanted while on shift, so there's no incentive to game the system to steal when you're not working. But the bosses decided Lucy and Chad were conspiring to steal, so they fired both of them by text message. It's been over a decade, and I'm still annoyed for the both of them that the bosses didn't have the decency to let them go in person, or even a spoken phone call. Next story. I worked as a day manager in a video rental store as a teenager. I had just graduated, and so I was the only staff member readily available to work the weekday daytime shift. Lucky me, I had a stable schedule and my weekends off. So one Friday afternoon, I clock out, grab copies of Reservoir Dogs, Welcome to the Dollhouse, and In the Mouth of Madness for my weekend viewing, and head home. Monday rolls around, as it inevitably will, and I drive up to the store only to find that it's gone. The building was still there, of course, but they have changed the locks and all the signage, shelving, decorations, and furnishings were gone. It was a ghost town. So I go back home, call my boss, and get no answer. Call the district manager, and get no answer. I leave messages for both, which were never returned. I don't think I ever got my final paycheck. Still have those VHS tapes floating around in my movie collection, though. Next story. I get a call on my day off from my work wife. Note, we're both managers at your local McDonald's. She's 18. The other manager in this story is in his 20s. They dated when she was a teenager, but she broke up with him months before. Anyway, on to the call. It's like 10 p.m. I answer. She's freaking out. Like I can hear her sobbing on the other line. It takes a solid 5 minutes to get it out of her. She butt him in the back when the closer came in, so he could work DT cashier. He decided to clock out first, then threw a fit about being put back there. Dude literally assaulted her and had to be dragged out by the 2 male cooks on shift. Apparently, he was back on medication. He'd already put in his 2 weeks. GM told him not to bother showing up for his next shift. Next story. I've got one. I'm a huge car nerd, and I really wanted a cool car-related job. So I finally got a job at a dealership as a porter/detailer, mostly cleaning cars. But I got to drive some fun cars too. I loved it. It wasn't my dream job per se, but it was something. Fast forward a few months. The day after I got back from a week-long vacation, and I'm fired for lack of experience. I found out a month later randomly at a red light that apparently it was because I used brake cleaner on someone's interior. Same color as the glass cleaner in an identical bottle, anyone could have done it. But the kicker was this happened when I was on vacation, so it couldn't possibly have been me. Next story. Senior VP of a major mining and resources company. Mine site rules about drugs and alcohol are enforced by random drug tests. Union agreement with management is that if site workers are subject to this, everyone should be. VP's number comes up for drug testing, and he fails. Had wine with lunch, he claims. Fired with no severance, because there is no wiggle room at his level. Upper management basically bargained the union into accepting zero tolerance by agreeing it would apply to upper management too, since their high 6 to 7 figured salaries with bonuses for mine safety records were worth skipping on day drinking. Trashed his career for a boozy lunch. Next story. Company owner did a plant tour once. Plant workers were walking back inside after their lunch break. It was a sunny day, and many chose to eat outside. Owner pointed to one of the workers walking in and demanded he be fired for wearing sunglasses in the plant. The way I heard it, owner was more annoyed because it came across as arrogance or something, not because of potential safety issues, but I got the story second or third hand, so who knows. The guy actually wore prescription eyeglasses with transition lenses, but there was no making the owner understand these weren't sunglasses, and the tint would fade in a minute once he was inside and away from the sun. Next story. I was at a store in a touristy area with my ex years ago and got a phone call from my boss. We had to let Lawrence go. Lawrence was an old guy who was kind of mentally clumsy, but a great worker who'd always cover a shift on short notice and go above and beyond if asked. He worked an alarm center for us and somehow incorrectly flagged an incoming alarm. He triggered a full facility evacuation. Our client claimed they lost $8,000 in lost production for the hour and wanted rid of him. It was sad to see, but a silver lining? We ended up moving him to a different contract, and he actually got a small raise for less work. Next story. Worked at a well-known high-end fashion company as an office bob. Sitting at my desk one day, and out of nowhere, security come up to the guy next to me, close his laptop, tell him to pack his things and escort him out. We, and I think he, had no idea what was going on. Turns out he was buying the sample sale handbags, 90% discount for staff, and selling them on eBay at roughly RRP prices using his real name. I'm talking like several £1,000s a bag. We later found his eBay account and saw the history. Made some serious cash. Next story. I don't know if this counts, but it's a funny memory. I got fired from a Bruster's ice cream for playing rap music on a snowy day, where we'd had absolutely zero customers. I even had to return my uniform. Like, what did they think I was going to do? Go around impersonating an ice cream scooper? Next story. Zone manager for a massive retailer. Essentially, an executive VP for the entire western half of the US. Took his secretary on a weekend trip to Vegas, visited one store. GPS locator showed neither of their company phones left his hotel room the rest of the weekend. The implications were obvious. Next story. I got fired on my day off because they switched the schedule on my day off and tired to get me to come in. Long story short, they said if you don't come in, then don't bother coming in tomorrow. I said no problem and hung up. Next story. Worked in a distribution center for an auto parts retailer. One of the guys certified to drive a forklift messed up and dropped a pallet of inventory from the third rack. He immediately failed the drug test right after. Next story. I think my own was rather surprising. On a Thursday, I was talking to my supervisor about new projects and tasks moving forward in the new year, expanding my role. The following Tuesday, I was gone. Next story. My mom used to work with someone who refused to wear a mask. She got mad and decided to leave early. She was basically fired after that, although they didn't say that she was fired. Next story. Cops came into the store. They left with a coworker in cuffs. Apparently, he was snooping through customers' phones looking for inappropriate photos, then saving and disseminating them. Next story. A longtime employee with a great track record was laid off and replaced by a recent hire who had been out of work only months prior. I'm sure the savings kept them warm. Next story. So, it was not a firing, but I had a job for 2 months to check me, if I am fitting in the store and the team. We were all having a great time, and I was the first male in the store, because my boss, also female, have always hired females. So I was in a team of females. We had a great time, and the boss was impressed by my work, so I was sure that I would get a longer contract. But on my last day, she gave me a goodbye gift and let me give her my working clothes. I was shocked. Next story. I was working for a farmers market association, doing marketing and publications. It was a done job, but the director was the most misogynistic person I'd ever met and didn't like my female manager. I had a habit of checking Craigslist first thing in the morning for free stuff. You never know what things you can find to use for kids' crafts and stuff. Well, one time I found a local guy giving away a tractor. How cool is that? We could promote the markets in parades, give rides, etc. Just needed a little work, like new tires and an engine. So after having this beast towed to our facility, there it sat, leaking oil, smelly, until we could get some volunteers fix it up. The director was mad for me bringing this thing in and taking up all the space, so he told me I can't look at Craigslist anymore. Made me sign a warning. Well, it's hard to break a habit. Plus, I was now looking for jobs on Craigslist. I left for lunch, and apparently while I was gone, they checked the history on my computer, not allowed to lock or sign out. I came back and was pulled into a meeting with director, my manager, and HR. The director began talking about how I was warned to not use Craigslist, how I went against orders, and what did I give to say for myself, as if I was a child. My manager just sat there, not defending me or saying anything, so I was told to clear out my desk and leave. I filed for unemployment, stating I was fired for looking at Craigslist. A few months later, my manager was let go, stating they didn't need a marketing department. I still check Craigslist first thing, but secondly, I check Reddit. What's the most ridiculous or dumb reason you've heard of someone being fired from their job? Next story. Here in the Netherlands, a woman who had worked at an airline company for I believe 15 plus years was fired because she tasted a piece of food, because it was unclear whether the meat was chicken or pork, and the customer had dietary restrictions. She sued the company and won the case. She got paid a pretty big amount of money to compensate for the months she wasn't allowed to work, and some extra for the trouble they'd given her. Next story. Me. I was working on a project with a coworker, but he had a history of bullying me. He was trying to catch me in a trap. I was trying to avoid taking his bait. When he eventually said in the most condescending tone, "Can you read?" I calmly told him that I didn't appreciate being talked to that way. A week later, I was fired. Next story. He stole a sandwich from the director of safety's lunch, tried to smuggle it out of the break room by shoving it down his pants, and didn't realize he was on the security feed. Next story. A woman that I work with used to work at Home Depot, and her only job was to just water the plants. She got fired after a week because she didn't water the plants. Next story. A dude on the day shift drew a smiley face on a post-it note and pinned it to the corkboard. Another dude on the night shift used push pins to create a vaguely shaped gun pointed at the smiley face and drew some stuff flying out the other side with another post-it. HR had me fire him the following day. Next story. Idiot that started work the same day as me decided to bring a bag of marijuana in his backpack to the government office we worked in. Marijuana is still illegal in the UK, and you could smell it from the next room over. He was given a warning and sent home that day, but returned the next day only to threaten his manager with violence. In an email to the entire team, he was sacked that day for good. Next story. I got one that has a absolutely arc. I worked in a high-end restaurant for a few years, and one of my buddies eventually ended up working there full-time. Guy was basically a Swiss Army knife, could work every station, and would always get the job done. Pretty good worker all around. Well, I ended up leaving, and a few months later, I heard he was leaving from a friend I had still at the restaurant. But apparently, it was not on good terms. Here's what happened. Our bartender was an older woman who couldn't take out her trash bin out from behind the bar because that thing was always heavy. So she would give $5 to whoever would take it out. She asked some busser to do it, and, well, apparently he didn't, but my buddy did. So he went up to the whiteboard where she held it up with a magnet, and in the whiteboard marker has it clearly explained who gets the money. Since he did the job naturally, it should be his. However, the busser didn't realize he'd done it. He talks to the managers, and they thought that money was missing from his end of the night tip out. So they checked the cameras and saw my buddy take the money. They were ready to fire him on the spot, not knowing he'd done the garbage job and thus earned that money. Only reason he wasn't fired on the spot is because one manager wanted to ask him what happened. Now, when he found out they were ready to fire him then and there, he basically was annoyed as anyone would be. He did practically every position and had been there for years. So he told them he'd quit working there after that pay period was over. Of course, they tried to change his mind, offering him a $1 raise, but that was a no-go. So clear-cut and simple, managers overreacted and were going to cut him over a fucking $5 bill, right? Wrong. About a month later, I stopped by and was saying hi to the old crew, and we ended up talking about the incident. I asked if they had the footage still, and if I could see it, and well, turns out my old buddy wasn't telling the whole truth. See, he never took the garbage out, and was just walking by the whiteboard, looked around, took the money, and erased the message, then messed up off right back to what he was doing. He essentially stole someone else's money, and the reason they didn't do it is because they didn't know they were supposed to do it, because they didn't see the message, and only knew because the bartender asked if they got their money or not. As terrible as this sounds, I agree with my old manager's decision because you don't forget with another person's pay. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Next story. There was a daycare teacher in Florida who smelled smoke during nap time. She ran to the kitchen and saw that chicken nuggets were burning in the oven. She extinguished the fire and was later fired for leaving the classroom. The director doubled down hard on her decision when talking to the press. Next story. He worked as a civilian on a military base and was caught watching adult content on government computers. It was later revealed that he was watching illegal content involving minors and is now a registered sex offender. Next story. Guy at our office thought he ran the place. He also sent inappropriate messages and chased women around the office. To help cover his not working, he placed those monitor filters on his screens so you couldn't see what he was doing unless you were sitting directly in front of them. So the AVP of our department sees this and has facilities remove them, as only upper management is allowed to have those on monitors, as upper management could be discussing your personal or work information with members of their team, amongst other things that a manager would need some privacy on. Next day, guy comes in and is super hot and annoyed because he thinks he was robbed. He marched into the AVP's office and not asks, but demands that he do something about, and goes back to his desk and sends out a department-wide email. AVP is like, "Who do you think you are?" and asks security to sweep his computer. Of course, they find all the NSFW stuff amongst his sending inappropriate messages and nonsense, which is enough to get him fired. He's walked out the same morning. Next story. One of my coworkers at my last job lost his job because he didn't take my advice. I told him never to steal from the company. He acted like someone I knew in the past who did. And if you do, when they find out and question you, don't lie. Fast forward 4 months, and the dude found a $20 mail order receipt in the parking lot while pushing carts, took to the security guard, and they devised a plan to try and cash it in and split it. Needless to say, this didn't work, and he was questioned about it the next day, lied, and was fired the day after that. If that wasn't bad enough, he sold out the security guard as well, and they both lost their jobs. Imagine going from having a job to not having a job over basically $10 and taking someone else with you in a matter of 3 days, because that's exactly what happened to them. I was on vacation when it happened, but the new security guard and the older brother of the one that got fired, who also worked there, told me what happened. And I couldn't believe it, and yet I could. The kid was dumb, and it cost him his and someone else's job. Next story. Somebody wrote an anonymous letter describing how a guy with 37 years seniority was unsafe to work with. I work in a very public safety-sensitive job. Kicker was his crew and shift wrote statements he was one of the best at his job. The rest of us knew this guy was solid at his job and very well liked. Coincidentally, he was one of the older guys that was paid more than everybody else, working under an old contract. The company despised this. We're pretty sure management wrote the letter. Next story. The employee got caught red-handed using the CEO's executive lavatory. It was done on a dare. The guy knew it was strictly off limits, but he did it anyway, thinking the coast was clear. Next story. Girl worked with us for months, and we were allowed to sometimes get a couple of items and put them in our break room so we can pay for them before we closed. Well, this girl somehow stole over $500 worth of product right under our noses. Everything was on camera. Boss called me into the office to watch the footage, and wow, was that good. She would have gotten away with it if we haven't done inventory too. She got canned, banned, and arrested. Next story. He set off the little poppers and mini firecrackers at work on the 4th of July. He would have gotten away with it too if he had the common sense to actually clean up after himself. There is only a skeleton crew there on holidays, and no one snitched. He mainly snitched on himself. Next story. I'm a nurse who worker with a fellow nurse who got fired because someone saw him pocketing medication. These things happen from time to time, but it was stupid because he was pocketing Zoloft, which, as an SSRI, isn't abusable. To this day, I have no idea why he did it. Next story. In the 90s, I was working for a company that had a large production floor and also offices. There was some showers. One day, someone came in early and caught a guy and girl from different sections in the shower together. The implication was that they were being intimate. Maybe, but I was aware they were actually quietly dating, and maybe they were just showering. Gossip tends to blow things out of proportion. Anyway, when it got to management, they took decisive action. She was immediately fired, and he was given a warning. I think it was one of the earliest eye-opening examples of obvious sexism I saw. Next story. I worked at a distribution center when I was in my mid-20s doing office work. A lot of what we dealt with was supplying shipments of over-the-counter meds to pharmacies and grocery stores. One of our drivers was selling whole cases of Sudafed to drug manufacturers. He tried to cover up the inventory discrepancies, but I caught them, reported it to my boss, who in turn handed it over to the authorities. Not only did the driver get fired, he ended up going to prison. Next story. As I understand it, Norwegians use Texas to mean crazy. So 2 Texas school district stories, both involving young female teachers getting fired because of social media pictures. 1. Teacher posted a picture of herself legally drinking a beer on vacation in England. 2. Teacher was tagged at a friend's bachelorette party with male entertainers. She didn't post any pictures herself. Texas equals crazy. Next story. I remember a news story from here in Iowa a few years ago, 2013. A dentist fired his assistant because she was too irresistible/attractive. If I remember correctly, it was the dentist's wife that made him fire her. She sued for wrongful termination, and it went to the state Supreme Court. The termination was upheld. So you can be fired in Iowa for being too sexy, I guess. Next story. My dad worked at a sign company when I was about 6 years old. He was a well-respected member of the team until his boss retired and his son took over. He tried to force my dad into a promotion that he wasn't qualified for, never went to college, and didn't want as he loved what he did. As a result, he got fired, plunging my family into poverty until 2 years ago, approximately 11 years. Next story. I was fired from a job for a Facebook post. My account is on private, and no one I worked with was on my friends list. Got almost $4,000 from the company after I got a pro bono lawyer, and she sent them a notice saying what they did was illegal. Next story. I know a guitar player who was fired for crossing the star line. Apparently, during his introduction on stage, he stepped forward one step further than the artist he worked with. Next story. After working at the same Trader Joe's for 3.5 years with nothing but glowing reviews, I was terminated for not saying hello to the coworkers when I arrived to work. A completely fabricated accusation, mind you. Besides, saying hello is not specified or even hinted at in my entire contract and employee handbook. Nothing even close to it. TJ's denied my federal unemployment claim and showed up to court when I appealed. The judge scolded them and advised me to retain legal assistance because there's obviously something else at play here. The firing was not illegal unless I can prove ulterior motives, which I cannot. Next story. I do IT support, and my last company was really hard to get fired from if you were hired as an actual associate rather than a contractor. Since we had a fairly small IT team, I know pretty much everyone in the building from when they were hired or had some kind of problem. One day I get a ticket to prep a laptop for a new associate. I set one up for him, but he doesn't start till the next week while I'm away on vacation. When I returned to work, the new guy's laptop was on my desk, and his accounts were disabled. I asked my coworkers what the heck I missed, and they said he was let go because it just wasn't a good fit after just 4 days. Here's what I remember hearing about his sins. On day 1, while my coworker was giving him his orientation for how to use his company laptop, the guy interrupted to ask what the company policy on interoffice dating was. On day 1, he walked around handing people business cards for his side business and trying to solicit them to use his services. His desk was downstairs, but he would go upstairs where there were more young women and try to ogle and flirt with them while they were busy working.